Ayşimur, inagaki asarıyor. Gayel şemşusirun abiyo, in külliyate asatıyor.
Taleb is from the Levant. Within my lifetime, Beirut was called the Paris of the Levant. Things went sour in Lebanon. They went sour because the Muslims gained an absolute majority. And they were determined to impose their will on the Christians, and civil war broke out, and the country was largely wrecked and invaded by Syria, and, well, invaded by the United States. But see, people stand up for their own people, right? And he is upset, perhaps justifiably so, that people from his part of the world are thought to be low people, generally, by the West. Now, the distinctions are not made. Distinctions between Muslims and Christian, distinctions between Arabs and non-Arabs are not made, and I suppose Taleb has justification for being upset about that. But I suppose what this comes down to is the people of the West generally do not want people from his part of the world coming to our part of the world because of the fear that they will make our world be like their world. Here he tweets on January the 8th, this inbreeding/cousin marriage theory is another crackpot by IQ, genes, race people who need to find genetic, not cultural, degradation. First effect of inbreeding is systematic diseases, and you see more among Ashkenazis, so stop the IQ link and crack science. Oh, okay, all right. You see a lot of deformities, obvious deformities, in places where there is rampant cousin breeding. I mean, you just have to look at pictures. A lot of these people look off, totally off. Now, I'm going to quote from Wikipedia here, which I suppose would banish me, from Taleb. He hasn't blocked me yet. There are citations here, but I'll just read from their abstract. Multiple studies have established consanguinity as a high cause for birth defects and abnormalities. A risk of autosomal recessive disorders increases in offspring coming from consanguineous marriages due to the increased likelihood of receiving recessive genes from cognate parents. According to population-based case control studies, a higher risk of stillbirth is associated with consanguineous marriage. Inbreeding is associated with decreased cognitive abilities in children. Younger ages of marriage are commonly seen in consanguineous marriages, which may account for the increase in fertility seen in these unions. Chances of postnatal mortality are higher in offspring. The first year holds the highest chance of death due to the risk of autosomal recessive genes. This is also the cause of health complications as children born from consanguinity enter adulthood. And we know that in quite a few Muslim countries, the rate of cousin marriage is very high indeed. A 2009 study found that many Arab countries today display some of the highest rates of consanguineous marriages in the world, and that first cousin marriages may reach 25 to 30% of all marriages in Qatar, Yemen, and the United Arab UAE. Consanguinity rates are increasing in the current generation.
Right, and we just have abundant evidence about the effect on IQ of marrying family members. It does tend to depress IQ levels. It does not tend to advance civilization. So, Kevin, what is your understanding about the extent of Taleb's contributions?
I think that he's come up with some good insights, certainly, the black swan and anti-fragility, right?
Yeah.
But he seems to have created this unified field theory, a one-man unified field theory, Talebism, And of course, he is not only the creator, he is the sole proprietor and the Pope of Talebism. And anyone who disagrees with him on any point is, a heretic.
So, I mean, he's always had a crank side, right? He's always been unhinged in some ways and brilliant in other ways.
Well, no, one of the identifying features of the crank is that they are fond of statements such as, if you do not understand the primacy of X, then you were an idiot. Look, people complain about your IQ fetishism, Molyneux's IQ fetishism. I side with them. I do not think that IQ is the be-all and end-all. I do not think that it is a moral indicator. It has usefulness. It has tremendous usefulness. Obviously, and going back to Taleb personally, obviously when one is part of a group which is deemed to be low in status, any kind of status, there is a feeling of suffocation if one comes from that group, a feeling of being singled out unjustly, of being submerged in a swamp. Because Group X demonstrates certain characteristics, that does not mean that I demonstrate those characteristics. Well, who's claiming otherwise? Yeah, there's going to be an assumption, in the absence of evidence to the contrary, that members of Group X will demonstrate stereotypical qualities. Yeah, and? I mean, just to be blunt, I find it rather sad and pathetic that Taleb seems to live in an intellectual space where he's terrified that someone's going to call him a dirty Arab. It's very sad.